Hey humans, how's it going? Susan Ruth here. Thanks for listening to another episode of Hey Human Podcast. This is episode 308. I had a conversation with Buck Angel. Buck is a trans man, a porn film actor, producer, and sex educator. He's the founder of Buck Angel Entertainment. He has won many awards for his work. He's a documentarian. He created an award-winning series about trans male sexuality called Sexing the Trans Man XXX. He also created the world's first collection of sex toys for trans men, designed by himself. He is reviled by some in the trans community and lifted up by others. We had a really fascinating conversation, and I really appreciate that he took the time to talk to me. Of course, it's important to note that this conversation is a not safe for work conversation. We talk about sex and sexuality, and so just be aware of that. Okay, usual stuff. Social media, Hey Human Podcast on Instagram and Facebook. My personal social media is Susan Ruthism on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. You can email me, susan@heyhumanpodcast.com. Love to hear from you. Do my best to respond to everything in a timely manner, but for sure I will respond to everything. Go to heyhumanpodcast.com and find the links page. Every guest has a pile of links that I have researched for you, put everything together in one spot so you can just go there and get lots of information about what we talked about, websites, all that kind of social medias for my guests, all that kind of stuff. Also on heyhumanpodcast.com, you will find the store. If you'd like some Hey Human merch, go check that out. T-shirts, hats, pen cases, tote bags, that kind of thing. Help support Hey Human. Really cute stuff, and I think you'll like it. Check it out. You can carry around your own Hey Human tote bag. Who doesn't want that? If you'd like to contribute to Hey Human, help keep her ad-free, there is a contribute button there on heyhumanpodcast.com. Every bit helps, and I really appreciate it. Another great way to support Hey Human is to rate, review, and subscribe on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. It's all about those algorithms, and every time you put in a review or hit that subscribe button, it really helps out. Speaking of subscribe, you can subscribe to my YouTube channel under Official Susan Ruth. There are videos on there and various things of music and a couple interviewee things, stuff like that. So check that out. SusanRuth.com is where you will find all my other stuff, music and art and kind of acting thing. And when people interview me, I put the interviews up on SusanRuth.com. You can also sign up for the mailing list on there. If you dig music and you want to check out my music, you can find Susan Ruth, All I Ever Wanted Was Everything, on all the places that you get music, and I appreciate that too. Okay, let's get into this. Stay safe, be well, take care of each other, be kind. Thank you for listening, and here we go. Buck Angel, welcome to Hey Human.
Hey, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. It's great to have you here. We both live in California, but here we are over Zoom.
We probably live like right next to each other.
Wouldn't that be funny? Where are you in the
Hollywood? Like pretty much like main Hollywood, like Sunset and Fairfax area.
Yeah. I'm over in Santa Monica. So.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So
yeah,
really.
So it's like 2 hours.
In LA, I was just going to say in LA, it's like 5 miles. It takes 2 hours to get there.
Yeah. True. The only time to go is on Sundays. That's when you go see your friends all over the city because there's no traffic on Sunday.
Sorry about the doorbell. We're trying to get the kid out of the house. It's always a big deal. I'm trying to get him to the park so I can so they're dealing with that. The doorbell just rang. Sorry if that.
Oh, no, that's okay. I thought that was a phone ding. I didn't even.
Right on.
Yeah, it's all good. Well, welcome. Glad to have you here.
Thank you.
I would love to hear to start with your background. So where did you grow up? What was family like? Life? Wait, that's backwards and dyslexic. What was family?
That's me.
That came out totally wrong. What was family life like? That kind of thing.
Well, so I'm 59. I'll be 60 this year. And I transitioned from living as a female to living as a man 29 years ago. Wow, hold up. I think this might be my anniversary of 30 years. I have to look at that. But April of 29 or so years ago, I transitioned here in Los Angeles when nobody was transitioning. There was not any of this technology. I mean, I think we did have maybe the cell phone. That's that little one that you could only punch numbers and maybe text a little bit, but really no technology. And I was lost. I grew up in the San Fernando Valley. I'm a total native California, and I didn't have a bad childhood. A lot of people will think that, I didn't. My parents really raised me as Buck on some level. I was a tomboy, which is what we called, I think people like that back. Still, people use that term. A more masculine female, and just a typical California surfer, skateboarder, little dude. And I was a little dude. I mean, no one really bothered me. It was kind of weird. I did have a great childhood, I'll tell you that. It wasn't until I started really coming into my own and growing into being a female that, sort of all the stuff happened, because, you started getting teased at school, and I started withdrawing, and I was never really good at school. So I got teased for being a dummy. And the only thing that kept me alive on some level was sports. I really excelled in sports, and I became a really excellent runner and sponsored by major companies like Adidas and stuff like that, and really trying to get myself into the Olympics trials. And it just didn't work because I was just not a happy sort of teenager on some level. Like 16, 17 was when really stuff started happening. And I became suicidal, and I attempted suicide, and I got put into a psychiatric ward. And I didn't have the terminology that people have today. We didn't talk about trans. We talked maybe a little bit about gay, but not even that. And it was more that, I did start becoming a cutter, and I cut my arms a lot. And it was all a cry for help, really. And looking back on it, but my parents, I feel bad really a lot for my parents, because I was that kid that they were just lost, and they didn't have, I went to a psychiatrist. Even the psychiatrist, just said I was a very masculine woman, and nobody could really pinpoint the issues I was having. So eventually I got the opportunity to transition, which was later on in life. And I took it without any knowledge or anybody telling me, or really, it was a life or death situation for me. It was like, I got to do this or I'm going to kill myself. That was always my mantra, my mantra, even after sort of starting the hormones and the doctor going, I don't know what I'm doing, dude, but we're going to do this shit. And I'm like, oh, he's like, basically he called me his guinea pig. And I'm like, well, I don't have a choice either. And, I always would say to myself, if it doesn't work out, I'll kill myself. Just like normal, if it doesn't work out, I'll kill myself, which is so insane when I look back on it. But that was my comfort. That was my sort of comfort blanket.
Well, it's control, right? That was a means of control when you feel so out of control.
That's right.
I mean, it actually feels more logical. I know when you say it out loud, people are like, oh my God, that's so intense. But to me, that's a logical feeling when everything else around you feels so out of grasp. The one thing you have dominion over is yourself.
That's right. Totally. So yeah, now I do look at that and I think, wow, that was my sort of escape and my way to feel like, if it doesn't work out, no big deal. I tried to kill myself already. So it's not really.
But did you grow up with siblings?
Yeah, I have an older sister who went into the military and then eventually into the police force. And, she was 30 plus years female police officer, but she was very one of the very first in LAPD police space. Yeah. And my younger sister became a businesswoman and did really amazing. My dad really raised us on a way to be very, very tough girls. We didn't take shit from anybody. And as girls, we were those kind of girls that were very rough and tough. But both my sisters are straight. They're very type A and very, very, I don't know, aggressive, but very,
they're more in their masculine energy than their feminine.
Right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When you were young, you didn't have a word for it really, I suppose.
No.
Yeah. Because I was a tomboy. I only hung out with boys. I liked them better. Girls were like weird and,
totally.
and didn't want to do cool stuff that I wanted to do, like jump off of buildings and climb trees and stuff like that.
That's right. It's more fun to be a boy. So yeah, but that doesn't look, you're not trans. Today we're dealing in such a space that I have a lot of feelings about, because I don't necessarily think just because you're a masculine girl or a feminine boy that you're trans. That's just ridiculous. But I see a push towards that these days, and I see this push to say, you're not a tomboy, you're a trans kid, and that actually as a transsexual person, it scares me, because this isn't a good journey. I don't, I appreciate the universe gave me this space, and I appreciate that I get to be alive, but I would not wish this upon anybody. I don't think being trans is a great thing. And I don't think trans is beautiful. I think that it's a disorder. I have a disorder. I believe it as a mental health disorder, and I fixed it and I worked through the world. But I think that just to say you're trans now is different than what I am. So trans is an identity now. This is not my identity. This is a medical condition I have that I fixed with hormones and surgery. And I live my life as a man. I do not live as a trans person. So I'm a little bit concerned today with the youth in this trans space, and some taking on a label that doesn't reflect what I think trans really is.
That's interesting. That must make you quite subversive within the community.
Oh yeah, I'm the problematic tranny for sure, because I don't care. Like I said, I have a lot of time under my belt, and I would not be honest if I didn't speak my mind. And that's not the kind of person I am. As you know, I started my career in pornography, and, that was hard enough. So I grew a thick skin because of that. And I've always been pushed against my whole life. So and just because we have this new sort of media of a social media, and everybody thinks they can just say things to you, I'm not on board with that. So I'm on board with being having integrity and morals, and my integrity and morals say I have to speak up if I see something dangerous happening.
Do you think if we lived in a society, and I'm going to go general here across the board, that supported both the masculine and feminine energies in an individual, there would maybe be less of the confusion? Because I feel like people get put into boxes so easily, like, oh, you're a tomboy, you must be a lesbian. Oh, you're a, whatever you identify in, you have to have like all or nothing vibe over it. Right.
Horrible. What a horrible space to, first off, to put a youngster in, but secondly, to take away from that as a female, right? So females can't celebrate their masculinity. That immediately makes you a trans kid. And that, and also,
or boys can't play with dolls, or like geek, or want to paint and be creative, or cry, or
I mean, that is a dangerous space we're going into. I think we're not understanding.
I think we've been there forever.
Yeah, we have.
And it's an interesting pendulum, I think. I mean, I hear what you're saying. I have many trans friends now, and I have family members who are trans. And I think, like you, they identify with like something wasn't fitting my whole life. And now I get to become the thing that I've always seen myself as, regardless of whatever genitalia I was born with.
Right.
But you're saying you think that people are pushed into space. I'm just trying to
Yeah. I'm not saying that trans kids don't exist. Of course not. What I'm trying to tell you is that this is a very, 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 very rare space. It is not so common as they're trying to make it seem. And so what I'm about to tell you is this: I'm different than what's happening today. I have a thing called gender dysphoria. I have been diagnosed by a doctor. I have moved forward through a system. I have, done these steps. Today, we have a thing called transgender, which is an umbrella term for any type of gender variant person. We have non-binary. I can go on and on. These people don't medicalize themselves most of the time. They have the identity of trans. You see the difference? I didn't choose the identity of trans. I don't even want you to know I'm trans on some level, where these people are identifying as trans and not moving through the system as me. We are two different types of trans people. And this is what is being mixed up. I'm not the same as that. And so I think I like to distinguish the difference between a medicalized trans, and I call myself transsexual, not transgender, because I'm a medicalized space. I've been diagnosed. I've been moved forward. These kids don't even get diagnoses. They self-ID as trans. I find that to be quite dangerous on some level, but at the same time, if you're not going through the medical system, identify as a pink unicorn. I don't care. It's the medical stuff I'm concerned with young people trying to make a choice. This is an irreversible space, irreversible. And it's very much something that you have to make sure you're prepared to take on for the rest of your life. I have to shoot testosterone every week. I have to continually, do my masculinization. I'm not a biological man. I never will be. And I think that, that's where the distinction between these two spaces needs to be put into the world. And like, there's a difference between identifying as trans and having gender dysphoria.
When you were young and you were doing things like cutting and all that, what sort of relief did that bring you?
Well, it's sort of like, I always like to say pressure. So, when something is building up and it has a lot of pressure and then you poke it and that's what I kind of felt like. It would release the pressure on some level. And speaking with other cutters, same thing, that there's a very common thread there that we feel like it releases a pressure because it takes the pain off of my brain into my physical space. So I'm removing the pain in my brain area and putting it into an actual physical space. So I don't have to keep thinking about it. I can just look at this bloody mess that I just made. And that just takes away from the insanity of my brain going, you're not a dude, it was, that's why I want people to understand I have a lot of empathy for the young trans people who are going through that. But I also see something that's happening that has me concerned as an older trans person where this saved my life. And when I start seeing a gigantic group of detransitioning people, mostly young girls, female to male, and most of them in their late teens to early 20s have already had mastectomies, and some of them even had hysterectomies, and realize they're not really trans, that has an alarm go off in my head, because that will not only affect them, but it affects me. And then the rest of the world sees that and they start to say, well, what about Buck? Is he really trans? Is that really something he should be talking about? It gets people believe me, it's a mess out there. And people are using the detransitioners as a way to say, see, this isn't real.
Yeah, it's weaponized for
That's
sure.
Right. Like everything.
Anything. Well, like anything, everything and anything anymore is weaponized.
That's right. Totally.
I've read some of the interviews with you and it sounded like you weren't really identifying boy, girl, left, right, whatever. It was just you were in this body and not even like, say, when I started thinking about boys and crushing on boys at 6 or 7 or some crazy young age.
Yeah.
But you weren't really in touch with your body at that point, it sounded like.
No, I'd say my very first crush, was when I was maybe 12 or 13 on another girl like me, a very masculine girl. And we were like best friends and we actually ended up fooling around and stuff like that. But, I think that's normal. I'm just going to tell you, I just don't see any weirdness in that. That's just completely normal.
No, I think kids do that, totally. Boy or girl, it doesn't matter. I don't think they sexualize it. I think it's experimentation. Something
that's right.
Good.
That's right.
Kind of like when you see little children masturbating. They don't have a concept of, I'm masturbating right now. They're that's just, right. That feels good.
That's right. It's like a scratch. You can't.
Yeah.
This shit feels good.
Yeah, exactly. I'm gonna get I'm gonna get letters on that one probably. But it's true. I think it's true. Having nannied plenty of kids, it's like, they do. You're like, okay, maybe we do that in your private space.
Yeah, so that, don't discourage it.
No.
I don't think it's cool to discourage masturbation.
I don't either. Yeah.
Part of
I'm masturbating right now.
Right on. Excellent. So it's a hard space I'm in as a trans person, as an older trans person, because I'm sort of in the middle a lot of the conversation. I don't necessarily think kids should be taking medications at 9 and 10. I think we're willy-nilling it on some level and just saying if a kid says they're trans, we're immediately pushing them into this space. And I also don't like labeling these kids as trans kids. I would say they're dysphoric kids, most definitely, but they could grow out. We've done studies. You see many kids desist or grow out of this at some level. And I just recently put a question on my Twitter.
I saw that.
It blew up. Like I just randomly throw stuff out there because I like conversation and I like to think about things on a deeper level. And, it was when I asked women, like, did you grow up as a masculine tomboy woman? And if you did, can you tell me about, did you grow out of it or whatever? And or else because I feel like you would have been sort of fast tracked to be a trans kid today. And I got 27,000 likes in like a week and like 2,700 comments. You should read them. They are fascinating, amazing, beautiful, lovely, because what this will do is it'll show a kid, to me, like a kid might be struggling with their identity right now, and they're a very masculine girl. And does that make me trans? No, it doesn't necessarily make you trans. And you read these stories of these women who grew out of their very, some of them grew up to be lesbians, or, and that's the other thing I'm concerned with. Are we transing a child that could just be a gay kid, a gay person? And we need to be more delicate around this and less fast and pushing.
I feel like the Venn diagram of sexuality and gender is just so massive at this point.
That's right. Totally. And we mix them up a lot of times too, that. So I just think kids, I have a kid, I have a 9-year-old. I'm around him constantly. I'm around a bunch of kids. I coach soccer. I'm around kids. I see them. It's not like I'm just making shit up for my own self. I see kids, even some of my son's friends are trans. And so what does that even mean? Right. So I'm all about social transitioning. That's what my parents did. They social transitioned to me. They didn't give me drugs. They didn't give me hormones. They didn't do any of that. They just let me be Buck. And it was very healthy. It's the puberty that does cause all of us, not just trans people, all of us hell.
Puberty makes you crazy for sure.
Crazy. So, the fact that they're saying these kids are going through puberty and we have to block their puberty or they're going to be all distressed. Well, come on, man. That's not necessarily true. And
I think for people that are, and this again, this conjecture, I'm not trans, so all I can use is conjecture, but that identifying as women, people that are born with the male genitalia and the male body morphic, that for them, if they go through puberty, it's going to be much harder, right, for them to be passing later in life.
That's what they say, but I can tell you that there's a lot of trans friends I have that look amazing, beautiful, lovely. They went through all of it. They said that they would have never taken puberty blockers. On some level, our struggle is real. And on some level, I believe struggle does create you to be a certain kind of person. And if your whole life is without struggle, I think that could be quite dangerous. But more important for me is that struggle less important than cutting off breasts and giving hysterectomies to a young girl who may be less than 20 years old? Is it more important for them to have that done or for them to struggle? And the struggle is just dealing with the breasts or walking the world looking female, right? You can cut your hair, you can wear boys' clothes, you can do all those things which are reversible.
Oh, sure. I got called boy my whole life. People from the back always thought when I had short hair, people always thought I was, because I'm quite tall, quite thin.
Right. It happens to, a lot of people when you get to, but did it make you like freak out for the rest of your life? No, but could it make a trans? Well, I did deal with that stuff and it wasn't easy. And I was called, a freak and weirdo because I was a girl dressing and being a boy. And I did but I will tell you that struggle on some level made me who I am today. So struggle on some level is important. But I think besides that, I'm a huge mental health care advocate. And I think we've taken that off the table in the trans community. Many people don't know that. You don't have to go to therapy anymore. You can just identify as trans and be pushed through this system.
Well, it depends on your state. My niece transitioned in Washington state. So they required her to go through much, much therapy. Wonderfully loving, supportive parents who were with her every step of the way and all that kind of stuff as well.
And in every state, they have something called affirmative therapy. Her parents were smart. They sent her to an actual therapist. That's not an affirmation therapist. An affirmation therapist doesn't push back on you. It affirms it affirms you when you say you're trans. I don't believe in that. Because therapy is a place where you start to sort of figure yourself out. That's what therapy is about. If your therapist isn't pushing on you, my therapist pushed on me. Are you sure? Are you not just a gay woman? We talked about so many things in my life. And then until we really realized, no, I really do. So therapy can be great, but it could also not necessarily be an awesome thing if you have a therapist who's not pushing back and understanding. But thank God your friend went through that system because
it's my niece. Yeah.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah. The thing too, I think for people, especially listening to this show, who still can't wrap their head around the idea of someone who is trans, I offer that any type of gender dysphoria or body dysphoria, like if I wake up one day and I look and again, this is so not the same thing. I know, please don't get mad at me. This is the best way to think That's the best way I can explain what I'm thinking in my head is that, like, if I look in the mirror and I'm like, oh my God, I feel so fat. I look so fat and ugly today. And then somebody else would look at me and be like, no, you're so skinny or whatever. And I'm sorry, but throw a rock in a room and you're going to hit someone who has some form of that dysphoria about themselves. My feet are too big. My breasts are too small. My penis is too short. I'm too fat. I'm too skinny. I look weird, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
The brain is a liar a lot.
That's right.
The people I know who have transitioned fully, the sense of relief they have to finally be in a matching system.
Yep. That's so for people like myself, we want our outside to fit our inside. And that's why I use the word transsexual, because today the trans space isn't necessarily about what we used to call passing, right? And so a lot of times I get, angry people coming at me in the trans community saying I have passing privilege, and the whole point of my transition was to look like and act like a man, whatever that means. And so I think the people you're talking about are the same as me. They wanted to look and act as a man or a woman, and that's why I had to have that distinction between trans identity and transitioning to live male or female. These are very important distinctions in this community that has grown so fast and rapid, and so many people are coming onto this space without diagnoses. And now they're saying you don't need gender dysphoria to be trans. So I'm like, but wait, what does that even mean? So yeah, they actually say that. They say you don't need gender. Anybody can be trans now. So I'm like, okay, that's just whatever. I don't even know what that means. I can't be a part of that because it doesn't reflect who I am. And it doesn't that's why I chose the transsexual label now.
Interesting. When you were younger and when did you have the aha moment where you thought, okay, I'm not a lesbian, I'm actually a gay man?
Right. Well,
assuming that's how you identify.
Well, no, I don't identify as a gay man. I identify a bisexual man.
So okay.
I'm very attracted to men, most definitely. And that happened in my transition. But I've always been attracted to women too. Got it. Yeah, it just happened that I started to see men sexually through my transition, and then I started to identify as a bisexual person. But that being said, I started really. I've always, I forever felt like a dude, whatever that means, right? I always was masculine. I always wanted to have these, I have a very masculine father. And so I think I always looked up to him, and that's why, hence I'm this ultra masculine dude, like hyper masculine. My dad was that guy, and like everything was he's a professional football player. We had, it's just that kind of imagine that energy. So, I always felt this way, even when but the opportunity to transition wasn't there for me. It wasn't even an option. It wasn't even put on the table by my psychiatrist or my therapist. None of them said I could transition to a man. And it wasn't until I got into my late 20s that I met a therapist who was a gay woman, who we both kind of acknowledged that I feel like a man. And she said, well, I don't know what to do, but let's figure it out together. So I never had the option. I always felt like a man. And eventually I just stopped saying it, because all my therapists would be like, well, you're just a very male identified woman. And so that was sort of like what I had to take. And I didn't know. I had no idea that I could be this man until eventually down the road, till people started telling me I could do this.
And you made now this is public knowledge, so I'm not outing anything, but you had made the decision to not have genitalia reassignment.
Yeah, that's right. I still have my vagina, and I've pretty much put it out there in the world. That's, my pornography. That's kind of what really was my shtick in pornography. And that's how I built my brand and all of that, by being the man with the vagina. And so really I chose not to do that because it just wasn't available to me back in the day. And what was available wasn't something that I really wanted to do. So I chose to learn. I really had to teach myself to love my body, if that makes sense, to really understand that you're stuck with this, dude. Like, if you're not going to ever have sex, you got to figure that out. But I like sex too much. And so I had to figure it out. And I did, with great, amazing partners and people who are willing to, experiment with me and make me feel comfortable, because it was very difficult in the beginning to have sex with something that I didn't feel was very masculine. Now it's like, are you kidding me, man? I couldn't even imagine having a penis. I don't want a penis. They're overrated. I'm like, I love my vagina. It's awesome.
Did you choose to, what about like, because you don't have breasts?
No, I chose to remove my breast because that was easy surgery.
Yeah.
And the surgeon just brought back a surgery from Belgium at the time called the keyhole, which a lot of people use now. And I was his first patient with that. And so it was amazing. And he did a beautiful, gorgeous job. And I felt, for me, it was more about my breasts. They felt the most feminine to me. It wasn't necessarily my vagina. It's because you can see the breasts, right? And I had to bind. I used to use duct tape, and then I would put on like one of those women's sports bras, and then I would put on an undershirt, and like every day that's what I had to wear. And that's much more hindering than my vagina ever was, because you can stick a sock in there and you can, what I mean, and play with that. But something about the breasts feel very female to me more than my genitals did.
Did you carry your son?
No, my partner now had the son. When I got together with my partner, she had the son already, and I adopted him. Yes.
Okay.
And so we're really great friends with the biological dad. So we have like a three-way family. When me and the biological dad are like best friends. And I'm telling you, I can't even believe it. My life has changed drastically having a kid in my life, and being great friends with the dad. And we just have such a great, you hear those horror stories of adopted parents and other people being involved. But no, it's all about the kid. We're all about the kid. So we don't have any weird stuff happening.
What got you into porn? How did that happen?
Well, it's interesting because what happened was I had a partner at the time, and she was a very famous professional dominatrix. And so we had a dungeon here in LA, and I was learning how to shoot movies and teaching myself how to do all this cool stuff. And porn has always been instrumental in technology, and porn has always been sort of on the forefront of creating things that eventually the mainstream markets take. And one of those was streaming media, and it was the porn industry that created webcams, and then eventually became all this. So what we see here, this is all first people were pornography. People don't understand that, because the porn people are willing to take chances where tech places don't necessarily do that. So long story short, I was doing stuff with her, and then I just noticed there was nobody. There was trans women porn. That was called she-male porn and tranny porn and all of that. But I did not see a man like me in pornography. It did not exist.
That'd be women that still have a penis.
Yeah, so that would be male who become female, but they still have a penis, right? So they would call them chicks with dicks,
right.
Stuff like that.
Yeah.
So that was a huge genre, and then it just clicked, like a light bulb went on. I was like, what? There's no man like me in porn. This is insane. And that's when I came up with, pardon me, but the man with the pussy. And like I created my own. You can say whatever you want on I created my own sort of space. And eventually, like I branded myself, and I became huge in the porn industry because I was the only one doing it. And I created the genre of porn, of female to male trans porn 21 years ago. And, it just skyrocketed me on some level. And from there, I got asked to speak all over the world, and I sort of started putting my porn on the back burner because I didn't really want to be doing porn at 80. So I figured that I needed to sort of figure out.
I'm sure there's a porn for that, though.
Oh, there is. There 100% is. And I'm not shaming anybody who wants to do that. No. But that's not my space, and I don't want to do that. Plus, I wanted to create a genre. It's not a genre if it's only me, right? So I opened it up, and more trans men started coming along. Though today it's still not as big as I would like to see it. And then eventually I started creating sex toys, and I created the world's first trans male sex toy. And that became a very good market for me to be in. And so I pretty much think of myself as a sort of sexual wellness industry more than pornography.
And a pioneer, I suppose, considering.
Yeah. And again, it's not easy being a pioneer. It's very difficult.
Did you face a lot of bigotry in the beginning?
Oh my God, it was insane. People hated me. Like the trans community hated me. The trans men were calling me all kinds of names. Like it was sick. And then the porn industry, people were so mad at me. They're like, that's weird. Yeah. I'm like, It's porn. Are you kidding me? What's weird about this? You should see some of the stuff you guys shoot. Like, what? I was
the Germans are like, we get it.
That's right. The Japanese, they got it. They became one of my biggest fans. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
So yeah, and it's I love pornography. I think it's a very important space. I do think it gets misused, and I do think there are bad pornographers.
Absolutely, yeah, of course.
But I do think porn can be a very healthy, great space for people.
Why do you think there is such a genital fixation in the world?
Because of biology on some level, number one. Number two, I think that people are obsessed with this idea that things need to be black and white, if that makes sense. So, here's the penis and the vagina, and that makes you a man or a woman. And this is, what we're going to base everything on, which on some level, yeah, that's true, because I do believe in biology. And I believe that biology is very important for trans people, because if people didn't know that I was a biological female, I would not be getting the healthcare that I need. I'll never be a biological man ever. And my body is not the same as a biological man, nor will it. Any trans person has to be attached to their biology. You have to. It's extremely important. And so today we're having this pushback on biology and saying that biology is a social construct and things like that. That's a very dangerous space to go into. Oh yeah, it's out there, and I fight against it constantly. That's why I'm constantly saying I'm a biological female. It gets hard, but I have to, or else people are going to be not understanding. The whole point of being a trans person is your biology. It's your biology. Trans is based on biology. You're born one way, and that's why they're trying to change it to assigned female at birth, as opposed to being born a woman or being born a man. They changed the language to assigned. I'm not assigned anything. I'm actually being born a woman. And I feel insulted by some of that language that comes around. It's insulting to where I come from and who I am. So I think people are just they've always been, people forever have been fixated on genitals. I mean, look at art back in the day, right? It's in sculptures and things. I just think, because people are also obsessed with sex, but we don't talk about that. We talk about obsession with genitals, but we don't understand those genitals create sex. And so I do think that people are. That's why porn is $1 billion business that will never go away, because people do like sex and they want to see it. And it's a biological human thing to want to have sex.
That's how the species continues. And of course, there are those who are biologically have genitalia that are not interested in sex at all. Of course,
that's right. That's right. And that's okay. And that's totally okay. But you cannot take biology off the table. And on some level, that's hurting the trans community a lot. We're getting a lot of pushback by the sort of extreme right, and trying to make us look like we're not real and that this is totally fake. And you know what I mean? And that's because we're not being honest about ourselves, and we're not being honest about our transition and why we do this and why it needs to be done.
Well, I think earlier you made a very good point in that I don't know that anyone would choose to go through. Why would anyone choose to make their life more complicated?
That's right. Remember, people used to say you choose to be gay. People would say that back in the day when we would fight for gay rights. You don't choose to be gay. You were actually born that way. I was actually born this way. And so by being born this way, and you can talk to my parents, I'll tell you from day one, Buck was Buck. They tell all my girlfriends, everybody I'm around, they're like, dude, like they won't even, my friends won't even ask. My dad will just go, Buck was always a dude. My dad's always doing shit like that. But you can see that I was always this person, and it wasn't something that just came all of a sudden out of nowhere. And I think today we're seeing somehow a lot of, they're calling it ROGD, which is rapid onset gender dysphoria. And it's very controversial in the trans community, because we're seeing a lot of young, especially young females, never showing signs of masculinity, never showing signs of wanting to be the opposite sex, none of that. And then all of a sudden coming home from school one day and saying they're trans. And this has a lot of us sort of like, wow, what's going on? They coined the term rapid onset gender dysphoria because it literally came out of nowhere.
I've watched some of the footage of interviews with people that have transitioned and then detransitioned.
That's right.
And one of the things that I noticed that was more common was, at least for female to male transition, was a sense that they were not safe in their female bodies.
That's right. That's really so tragic to hear that.
Tragic.
Tragic. Yeah. And that's the truth. I lived as a woman half my life. I didn't feel safe as a woman. I got kicked. I got beat up, constantly got beat up because I was a very masculine, butch lesbian who got my ass kicked constantly by people. I mean, I could tell you stories that were insane. And no, I know that feeling, but we can't encourage girls to want to change because they feel unsafe. That's not trans. That's something else. But they are saying that a lot of these young girls are transitioning because they think it's easier to be a boy. On some level it is. You're less sexualized. So they put on boy clothes, they start taking hormones, they grow a mustache, they're dudes. But why then, if that's the case, do we have a large population of D-trans, right? That just seems completely insane that there's a group of 28,000 D-transitioners on a Reddit group. That's just unbelievable to me.
How many people are transgender?
On the D-trans group?
No. How many people are identifying as trans?
Well, yeah, there's hundreds of thousands, millions in the world. Hundreds. Sure. This is just in the United States. So just in the United States on a Reddit. So yeah, I mean, who knows? Some people like me would have never even come out as trans, right? Sure. The only reason I come out as trans is because of my work. But I walk the world every day out there. No one will have a clue about me. And that's the whole point. I want to go to the supermarket without someone looking at me. I just want to be like, hey, who's that weird looking dude?
Sure.
So, you know what I mean? So
yeah.
Again, you see the difference between myself and the newer generation doesn't necessarily want to pass as men and women, and then realizing they're making a mistake at some point and wanting to desist or detrans is they've already grown mustaches and they've already removed their breasts and they've already maybe even had a hysterectomy, so they're not even going to be able to move forward and have kids. And we're gonna, mark my words, you all come back to this podcast in a couple of years, there's going to be a large backlash from this, and it's sad. It's so kids are caught in the middle of this. And it's
you had said a few minutes ago that you have been a dude from the get-go, right? So
that's right.
So there's a fighting against each other concept, just even from you, about whether people who think I'm a guy wanting to then live their lives and transition.
That's right.
Because you were also that, although
Yep.
So how does one know whether they're the one that is
right,
exactly who I am, and
that's
right, I'll change my mind, maybe I won't, but I feel much more confident being in what I think I'm supposed to be.
So why are those kids detransitioning yet I didn't?
Isn't that a good question? Yeah.
Well, I one of the reasons I know is because I have many friends who are detransitioners. I befriended them because the trans community will not befriend them. The trans community ostracizes them and says, "Oh, you're scary. Get away. People are going to use it against us. You were never trans." Just being all that. That's not nice. These are part of our community. These kids are part of our community. Most of them are young kids too. What I mean by that is, 20-year-old kids and 16, 17. Some of the, oh my God, I will send you will cry reading this stuff. It makes me cry every day because this saved my life. And then when I read that, I'm like, holy shit, like, what is this? So that being said, the only thing I can look at that's different than me and them is structure. I actually had a structure. I went through an actual structure where I had to go to 2 years of therapy. I had to dress and live as Buck for those 2 years. I did not take medication. I did not have surgery. I did not do anything. I just had to go out in the world and test this out. If it didn't work, I would have gone right back to dressing like the way I did before as a girl, and everything would have been hunky-dory. But we're not doing that. We're saying, oh, you say you're trans? Here you go. Literally, go to Planned Parenthood. 45-minute intake. 45-minute intake. And I know this for a fact because I talk to these kids. I don't care about adults. I do not care. I mean, I do, but adults can make choices, and many adults make bad choices. I have too, but that's being an adult. When we have children involved, it's my as an elder in this community, and as someone who cares and has really had my life saved from this, I care about kids, and I don't want them to make this choice in the wrong way. And so when you go to Planned Parenthood and they intake you for 45 minutes and then they give you an actual prescription for testosterone, what do you think about that? I think that is unbelievably wrong in a medical space, and I find it to be unethical on some level. And it just doesn't, it blows my mind. Do you know how hard it was for me to get testosterone? It used to be so hard. There were pharmacists who wouldn't even give it to me. They were like, no, you don't need this. And I'm like, what? So today it's like, why are they just passing this stuff out to these kids who aren't going through any system? They don't even need to have mental health care. As long as you walk in and you say you're trans and you sign a release that says you know what you're doing, you think an actual 17-year-old kid knows what they're doing with no laid down foundation, only their friends telling them, yeah, dude.
I mean, I think kids identify as gay or straight from a really young age. So, and again, I don't feel qualified to speak to how it feels, obviously, because I'm not in that space and I'm not part of the community.
Okay, that's fair. That's
as an ally, yes, but not as an actual member of the community.
That's fair.
For me, all I can do is think, well, okay, I know, having watched documentaries and things like that, where these little kids are just like, no, I'm a boy, or no, mom, I'm a girl, or no, I'm straight, or I'm gay, or, I've been around little kids. I nannied kids, and there was one couple girls that I nannied, and I knew this girl was, 3 years old. I was like, when she grows up, I mean, I didn't say anything to the parents or anything like that. I was just like, I knew when she grew up, this girl was going to be a lesbian. I just knew it. And here she is, all grown up. She's a lesbian. I knew it. It was so obvious to me when she was 3 years old. How would that be,
Well, because 100%. And again, I'm going to go back to telling you, I don't think that there's not gay. Of course there are. I mean, that would be ridiculous for me to say that. My point was going to be this. There is not the same for somebody to identify as a gay person at 10 and then to identify as a trans, because a trans person is medicalized. Gay people aren't medicalized.
Right.
There's nothing that you could say to a gay or that could actually become detrimental from being gay or being straight. That it has nothing to do with anything other than your own mental space, right?
Yeah. No, I hear what you're saying.
Yeah.
The fact that in order to transition from one gender to another, it requires some pretty epic steps.
That's right.
And not only physiologically, but totally mentally, absolutely on a psychological level.
That's right. And so of course a 10-year-old could be like, but the thing is, the language is also what bothers me. So I wanted to be a boy. I was like, I want to be a boy. So I never said I want to be trans. So, we have trans. That's why I'm telling you, I don't like this label trans kids, because that trans could be a gay kid. You don't know that. Just because they're acting masculine doesn't mean that they're actually, but they know the language. Kids know the language because it's all over everything now. It's all over TikTok. It's all
TikTok. It's very big on TikTok.
It's danger. I'm watching that. I'm watching it like a hawk. And so is the hardcore right. And they take all of that shit and they put it out in the world. And they're like, look, they're all a bunch of crazy, mentally ill weirdos. Because you see 13-year-old kids, 13 with top surgery. Literally little girls who
to me, that for any surgeon to perform surgery like that on
unethical
on a child is that has no cancer or anything like that. That's and not even like you said, like go out and living into the world before that, but to perform surgeries on children who aren't even fully grown or developed. That's right. That seems beyond bizarre. Yeah. And also, I'm not a big fan of that myself. I can't begin to understand where that person is coming from, but it seems unethical to perform surgery on someone under like physical surgery. Hormones can be stopped and revert or whatever, but to start, tearing apart someone's body. And by the way, I have that same opinion when it comes to, parents that let their 14-year-old get a nose job or implants. Me too. It's like, wow, they're not even done. Your brain's not even done being formed and developing and getting to a point until it's 23, 24.
Yeah, that's right. And when you stop puberty, what do you think is going to happen with that? They've already done studies on when kids take puberty blockers, their actual intelligence has gone down by a lot because you're stopping brain growth. And so, parents are being pushed into this space by trans activists saying, well, you have to transition your kid if they say that, because if you don't, do you want a dead daughter or an alive son? Who says that? Who says that shit? That's manipulative and indoctrination, and I won't stand for it. And, you can't talk to a parent. If someone said that to me about Jonah, first off, I would be completely looking about how to do this shit. I would go crazy, but I wouldn't immediately medicalize my child. Here's the deal. Once you give medicine to that child, forever that child is on medicine. So, I really work in this space of let's figure it out for a little while and then medicalize, but it should be your last resort.
But we live in a society across the board that goes to give the pill before figuring out what is causing the thing that needs the pill. Right.
ADHD. Remember ADHD?
I mean,
huge.
They wanted to put me on that stuff, and my mom wouldn't let them. They're like, let her take apart the toaster and rebuild it.
There you go. That's a great parent. Thank you, parent. And that's what a lot of
parents. She was a terrible parent, but that was good advice.
I'm telling you, I'm watching. I help a lot of parents. I'm like, calm down. It's not that. Let the kid dress in boy clothes. Send them to school with the Sam. All kids are totally malleable. Kids will get it and they'll call him Sam and everything's cool. But I talk parents a lot out of going that route of medicalization.
Also, if your son wants to wear a dress, so be it. It's just a dress. If you have a problem with that, I dare you to look at how men dressed in the 1700s with their wigs and their high heels and their fancy belts and their makeup, and they were hyper masculinized. That was the height of manhood.
That's right.
The higher the heel, the butcher the dude,
That's right. And these are the things there's a difference between your biological sex and gender. I do believe those are two different things. And, I will never change my biological sex, but on some level I changed my gender, and my gender needed to be this person. So we need to say the problem is gender. I think on some levels, we have these very rigid rules of gender. Men have to be this way. You can't cry. You can't
live in a binary society.
Oh, we totally do. Yeah. And so, why can't a little boy wear a dress? Why can't a little girl wear pants? So that's to me where we made the wrong turn and everybody became trans, instead of saying, well, wait a minute, all kids play around with gender and nail polish and maybe lipstick and cutting their hair crazy and wearing wigs and all kinds of stuff. And that's very normal behavior. And I don't think we need to rigidly shove them into the space. And you have to remember, trans is a very, very, very small space. It's not as big as everyone's trying to make it be. It's a very, very rare kind of disorder on some level. It's not as huge as, that's why it's different. The identity choice. Remember, you can't forget that. The identity choice is different than actual medical necessity of gender dysphoria.
But you will have people that then say, oh, it's a mental illness and people should just be thrown into a facility then if they think that. Well,
I believe it's a mental illness on some level. So that's not true. What it needs to be done is I have a mental disorder, and I don't need to be thrown into a psychiatric ward. I need to have been given the medication, the surgery to make myself. I proved it. I'm proof of it. And I can show you hundreds of other dudes like me that we prove it. Once we got our medicine, once we got our space in here, we moved into the world. I became very successful. I was not successful as a woman. I'm very successful as a man in my life, in my love life, in my business life and everything. I didn't graduate high school. I was completely called a dummy. You're never going to make anything out of yourself. And then my dad today is like, holy crap, who are you? And so that's what I want the world to see. That's why I'm here. I'm here to show you that, yes, trans is a real thing. And there are people who need to take this space. But today we have exploded in a way that doesn't reflect who I am. And I need for people to see the difference between some of the stuff that's happening today, which I do believe on some level can be an indoctrination space. And then what's happening in the medical, I speak from the medical space. I don't speak from the sort of more space of identity.
What do you think manhood means?
Well, that's a loaded question that I can't answer. Because, for me, it's different than Joe over here, right? And then Joe over here, who was born a man, has a way different experience than me, who was born a woman and became a man. And I prefer on some level the fact that I had this experience, though I wish I was born a man. I don't push my female experience away. And a lot of trans people do, but I do not. I accepted the fact that Laura really made me this great man, because Laura suffered as a woman and I get to see that suffering. And as a man, I get to bring that empathy and compassion to the world as a man and say, hey, wait a minute, man, you can't talk to women like that. That's just not cool. Why do you, but men are taught that, right? So I, on some level, feel like the universe gave me a space to teach men how to be more male. And to be more male doesn't mean you need to be an asshole and be not compassionate to women. It means you need to be more compassionate. That's, to me, masculinity and maleness is being compassionate, loving, walking through the world with the idea that I'm not better than you.
Yeah, I ask the question because I know it's a tricky question and doesn't really have an answer, but because I read in one of your interviews that you talked about how you were at odds with your vagina, and then the day you learned to embrace it, it changed everything for you. And I thought that was so fascinating. And again, speaks to the fact that genitalia do not a gender make.
That's right. That's right. Clearly, look at me. So yeah, you're right. That's the other thing. It has nothing to do with my genitals. It has everything to do with my brain. My brain is transsexual. And so my brain needed to sort of be fixed. Because when you walk the world with a brain that says you're male, but your body and your physical space says you're a woman, it's a horrible space to be in, because every day people look at you in the way that you wish they wouldn't look at you. And, on some level, I was a pretty girl. I modeled and I was a fashion model. And that was a very difficult space for somebody like me to be in. And, I got called pretty and, hit on all the time by dudes. And I hated it so much. But I did it. And, I'm now looking at it. I'm glad I had the experience, because I see what women on that level deal with on a daily basis, and how disgusting men were to me, and the things they would try to do to me was so insane. And like, how do you think you get to just do that? But that's that male, really weird man space.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, I just burped.
Right on. I love a lady that burps.
Talk to me about the sex toy ventures. Where did that stem into? No pun intended.
Right on. So, I've always used sex toys. They really helped me to connect to my space. And I love sex toys so much. And then, as I grew into my space and became more of out there, and trans guys reaching out to me, how did you become so comfortable with your vagina? And I couldn't really express it other than the fact that it was masturbation. It was really masturbation that helped me. But a lot of the guys couldn't touch themselves. They just cannot touch their vagina. So I'm thinking, they're missing out on such amazing space because they can't touch it. So I had this idea, and I remember I bought this other toy that was made for men, and I cut it up and I made it, and it was a stroke. So, cisgender men have a stroker that goes over their penis, and they stroke their penis with it. So I just said, wait a minute, that's very smart. I'll make this because when we take testosterone, our clitorises grow quite large. And so I made something that slips over the clitoris. It has like a little bit of a penis head on it. It's called the Buck Off. I named it the Buck Off. And it slips over the clitoris, and you literally stroke like a dude. And I made it very accessible financially. I made it really like $30 or something, and it blew up. It became like one of the fastest selling sex toys in the market. And I think I created that 4 or 5 years ago. And Forbes magazine, it was the first ever in the history of sex toys. It never was there one made before. And I couldn't get anybody to make it at first. Nobody would touch it until one company finally said, dude, that's a no-brainer. And we just blew it up. And from that point, I just became sort of like a sex toy maker. And I just started creating all kinds of cool products for trans guys, to packers, things that, mostly they're about teaching guys to have an orgasm. Because I'm going to tell you, there was tons of guys who didn't have orgasms. And I thought, my God, orgasms are like the seed of life on some level. And I
recommend them 10 out of 10.
I had guys writing me like, they said, I'm crying right now because I never had an orgasm. I'm 24 years old and you've changed my life. And, that's it. That's all I ever needed to hear, because I just said, wow, I did my job. And, now guys are so like much more connected to their bodies sexually, and they're not getting bottom surgery, and they're keeping their vaginas, and they're realizing they can walk the world with these genitals, and people will love you, and people will marry you. And, you can have a functioning life that way.
Yeah. I mean, that's the truth of it across the board for all of humans, is to believe that we're enough.
That's right. It's a hard space, like I feel very lucky that I'm, almost 60 years old, and I feel the happiest I've ever been in my whole life, ever. And age, there's a lot of ageism out there. Oh boy, do I see that now. The young trans guys, sit down, sit down. They call me Trampall. They're sit down, Trampall. We'll take it from here. You're old. You seem senile. I'm like, what? Wow. Who says that to a person?
Every generation believes they're the smartest, right?
That's right. So I just, I remember I used to do that nonsense. And so, there's that. I have a different way of being than them, right? I think differently than they do. And so with that, but I have a large group of guys and people that really support my work a lot. I have more love than hate, most definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. Tell people how they might find you.
Oh gosh, I'm so accessible. It's kind of scary. My partner's like, dude, you're way too accessible, because I write everybody back. I just feel like it's so important. So buckangel.com, my website, and you can get me on Instagram, Buck Angel. You can get me on Twitter, Buck Angel. You can get me on Facebook of Buck Angel Official, and YouTube, Buck Angel Official too. So
yeah, and I'll put links for everyone on heyhumanpodcast.com, and they'll be able to get to you quickly. Thank you so much for being open and talking with me. Yeah, I really appreciate it.
No, I appreciate you a lot. Then thanks to all your listeners for listening. And if anyone wants to talk, just reach out. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Absolutely. And have a great day. And
yeah, you too.
We're in soon. Good Santa Ana winds, crazy ass weather out there. But
I know it's actually weird out. Totally.
It's so weird.
So weird. Is there going to be an earthquake? I think it's earthquake weather.
That's weird. I felt like that today. I thought, God, why does it feel like there's going to be an earthquake?
Because it's that kind of weather. I grew up in LA. I'm telling you, as a kid, those gnarly earthquakes, I was around all of them. And this is exactly that kind of weather. So hold on to your hat, my friend.
Down the hatches. Thank you, Buck. Have a great day. Thank you for listening, everybody. I really appreciate it. Bye.
Bye.
Rate, review, and subscribe to Hey Human on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks. Bye.